Sure.
I should say those are all our preferred language.
So you're a test. Stevie, I'm just signing stuff. If you let me know when we're ready or. Okay. Okay, the hour being 7:10 PM on Monday, February 26th, I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Bridget, can we have a roll call for the committee meeting, please?
Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Cote?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks?
Here.
Trustee Niramatsu?
Here.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Here.
And President Garvey.
Here. Thank you, Bridget. The first item is a topic we've talked about multiple times, but there's some updated recommendations and action here. It's a discussion of proposed options for the improvement of intersection of Maple Avenue and 31st Street. So as usual, the board has the benefit of a very detailed memo from staff with a lot of the background information and the alternatives. But I am going to ask our Assistant Village Manager, Stevie Ferrari, to kind of maybe provide the public some summary information going through here, and then we could open it up to board discussion or any other presentations necessary.
Sure. Thank you, President Garvey, the Board of Trustees. This item up for discussion is the 31st and Maple Avenue Phase 1 report. It is related to the 2020 Des Plaines River Trail South, at which time the Village of Brookfield became the lead community. Intended to study several gaps in the southern section of the Des Plaines River Trail, and the long-term goal is to develop a path from Lyons to the Illinois and Wisconsin border. So as part of the work on the Des Plaines River Trail South, 31st and Maple was specifically identified in coordination with the Village of LaGrange Park, and that is due to a number of certain accidents occurring at the intersection. As part of the bike path project, LaGrange Park and the village have executed an IGA and are both participatory in the intersection analysis of Maple and 31st Street. So both communities agree that this is a concerning intersection. With us today is representation of SIORBA. They are who have conducted the analysis evaluating the feasibility of incorporating some more lengthy safety measures at that intersection. Within the memo is the preferred alternative of a 3-lane configuration at all legs of the intersection. It is the most cost-effective as well. We do include some pros and cons of that preferred alternative with 31st Street impacts, including pavement markings, addition of left turn lane, reduced cycle length by half, and Maple Avenue impacts, including pavement markings, addition of left turn lane, and reduced cycle by half. There are some advantages and disadvantages identified of a 3-lane configuration at all legs for 31st and Maple. Advantages include providing left turn lane, again at all legs, potentially no parking impacts on Maple Avenue, no roadway widening required, and no impacts to adjacent properties, and this alternative having the lowest project cost estimate of $0.6 million. The disadvantages being one eastbound and westbound through lane on 31st Street, as well as potentially less space for trucks to turn from Maple Avenue. I will allow Mark to come up and speak a little more in depth to the other alternatives that were reviewed, as well as answer any board questions that may be specific to SIORBA's information and their analysis.
Good evening, and thank you for being here, and I appreciate your presentation. And just, you know, the board has the very detailed memo with the options and the advantages and disadvantages, and we've reviewed this, but you make your presentation, like the public, there's some public hopefully watching this live broadcast and in the audience, so if you want to just kind of paint the picture of the various options, we appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, President Garvey and trustees. And thanks, Steve, you summed up really well what I'm going to present here, but I'll go through and give kind of a thorough, hopefully thorough presentation of some of the alternates that we looked at. So for the existing conditions of the project, along 31st Street, it's an IDOT route. It's considered a minor arterial with 30-mile-an-hour posted speed limits, and it sees about 14,500 vehicles per day. It consists of 2 lanes in the eastbound and 2 lanes in the westbound direction. Next slide. On Maple Avenue, it's a major collector. The north leg is considered an IDOT route, while the south leg is a local route. This roadway also has a 35-mile-an-hour posted speed limit, and it sees
30 or 35? Did you say 35?
30 miles per hour, sorry. And it has about 8,000 to 9,600 vehicles per day. Here you can see what's called a crash exhibit. Every one of those little rectangles that you see on there represents a crash that occurred within a 5-year period. Before I get into the details, IDOT has indicated that they have a number of different ways to indicate if an intersection is unsafe. The main format that they use right now is indicate if it's in a critical safety tier. And IDOT indicated that this intersection is not in a critical safety tier. With that, looking at this, if you could back up one. One of the things that we noticed in our study is that there's quite a few left turn crashes within the intersection, especially with westbound traffic turning to the left. There were quite a few crashes there. About 44% of the crashes were involving that type of movement. As far as the accident severity, 23 of the 111 crashes involved injuries. There were no fatalities within the intersection, and the crashes occurred primarily during the early morning rush hour, the evening rush hour, and at lunchtime. As far as the existing conditions within this area, it's been noted that there's been an excessive weight along Maple Avenue. We've also been informed by IDOT that there's detector loops that are defective at this intersection. So that might mean that if you're a car waiting at Maple Avenue, the detector loops may not sense you, and it may not, switch to a green light for you to get your movement in. The alternates that we looked at, the first one is the do-nothing alternate. And the obvious advantage with this is it's the lowest initial cost. And there could be the chance that the future signal loop repair done by IDOT will improve the performance at this intersection. Disadvantages.
Can I ask how big of a fix is that? I mean, that's something that would seem like would need to be done no matter what is done. Is that a major repair?
No, I don't think that's a major repair. It may just be something where IDOT is going to try to do that repair in conjunction with a number of other intersection improvements. So they may not go out just to fix one detector loop. They might.
Because if I'm not mistaken, there was a problem at 30th and Maple that I think was addressed recently. And it didn't seem like it took that long to fix it. But it was just more of a side note. It seemed like it was not that big of a deal to get it fixed, so.
Okay. Yeah, but I haven't heard anything more from IDOT on if that has been repaired or not, but when we asked them the time frame, they said it could be a while before that's done.
Do we know if that's been an issue for a while?
Yes.
Within years?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and I guess in a way, you kind of feel better, hope, that, because I think we've all said that.
I'll verify it when I go home tonight.
At least 5 years.
One of the first alternates that we looked at was going all in and, keeping 2 lanes of traffic in each direction on all legs of the intersection and adding a left turn lane. Now, some of the advantages, we're adding a left turn lane at all legs, so left turning traffic can queue up in their own lane. And we have 2 lanes through all directions, so the intersection capacity will be the largest with this alternative. The disadvantages are with adding the additional lane, you need to widen the roadway, and this will have significant impacts to the adjacent properties, especially the gas stations at the northeast and southwest corner of the intersection. In addition to the gas stations, there's other adjacent properties that will be impacted. And when you're doing any excavation near the gas stations, you're more likely to have special waste issues with that. The overall cost for this project is, we didn't get too much into the details, but like roughly about $5 million is what we were estimating. The second alternate that we looked at involved providing a 5-lane section along 31st Street and then providing 3 lanes on Maple Avenue. In this alternate, again, we're providing left turn lanes at all legs, so that should improve the left turn collisions. We do have 2 through lanes on 31st Street, which has more traffic on it. And the way we have it striped, it will be very similar on the south leg of Maple Avenue, so we anticipate that there'll be no parking impacts there. This will have to go through IDOT, though, for them to ultimately approve that option. The disadvantages, sorry if you could back, disadvantages, there's still the roadway widening, and there's still significant impacts like were mentioned for the first alternate, just not quite as severe. The cost for this one is estimated to be about $3 million. The third alternate that we looked at involved providing 3 lanes on all legs. So for 31st Street, it's kind of putting it on a road diet. So we're essentially eliminating 2 lanes of traffic in each direction to provide 1 lane of traffic in each direction with a left turn lane. The advantages for this one is we have the left turn lane, so increased safety with that. Again, potentially no parking impacts on Maple Avenue on the south leg there. No roadway widening, so we're essentially just restriping the roadways, so no impacts on adjacent properties. And compared to alternates 1 and 2, it's a low project cost. The disadvantages with this one is that now we're decreasing the through movements on 31st. We're allowing 1 eastbound and westbound through lane along that roadway, and there's less space for trucks to make turns from Maple Avenue onto 31st. The overall cost for this alternate is $0.6 million, and this was something that we did already submit a tech memo to IDOT, and they did not have any major comments on it. One of our main concerns with IDOT is that they may oppose a road diet on this roadway, but we haven't heard anything at this point in time on that.
Can you explain why there'd be less space for trucks to turn left in this option? I mean, what's explain that disadvantage?
Sure, if you're on Maple Avenue and turning on to making a right turn onto 31st, you have 2 through lanes on 31st that you can turn into. Under this scenario, if you're southbound making a right turn, you have one westbound lane to turn into, and if you extend into the center line, then you're conflicting with vehicles that may be in the left turn lane eastbound.
And is it just less, is it still possible for the trucks to make the turns, or is it just, it's just gonna be more difficult?
It'll be more difficult, you know, where you might have had a semi-truck that could make it before. It might be a smaller version of a semi-truck that could make that turn. So that would be something, again, that would be a design exception for IDOT, since it's an IDOT route.
Do you think that, I mean, how heavily that will weigh on IDOT's approval of something like this?
We've had past projects where IDOT has approved things like that, but I can't say 100% what IDOT would approve or disapprove in this analysis. And then as far as the levels of service, just for some background, it's kind of like just grades in school. Level of service of A is very good. Level of service of F is very bad and very congested. So the top chart shows what the existing conditions are. That's essentially with existing traffic. For the analysis that we were doing, we were projecting the traffic to year 2050 traffic. So this is increased traffic within the area. And if you go with the full cycle length along 31st Street, which is following the signal timings that IDOT, you know, kind of currently has, we had an issue on the north leg or the southbound movement for Maple where we had a level of service of F in our analysis. But we were able to, if we reduce the cycle time to half of what it currently is, that means there'll be, you'll get, yeah, more green time more frequently. And that seemed to improve the level of service for the intersection from the analysis that we had. And that should also reduce the amount of queues in the intersection overall.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions, or, I mean, obviously, this is an intersection that we're all familiar with, and the accidents, and when I saw the number of accidents, I feel like I've seen most of those accidents, I heard most of those accidents. I live a block away from there, so I've heard accidents. I live at 30th and Maple, basically, and I hear the accidents from there, and I agree, it's mostly the westbound traffic, the left turns, and we've talked about various solutions, and it seems like the public has always been asking for left turn lanes, but obviously there's costs and benefits, and it will be a major change if something like this goes through. Derek, did you have anything to add? I know you're very familiar with this intersection over the years and IDOT. And
Sure. So I think one thing is with Mark was addressing the number of accidents out there, and it doesn't meet IDOT's critical intersection, which are typically the top 5% in the state. Talking to staff, the general feeling between Brookfield, but also in LaGrange Park, is it was the severity and the injuries that are occurring out there. So we did look at, I'll kind of summarize a little what Mark went over. When we looked at adding the fifth lane in each direction would obviously perform the best. The problem with adding the fifth lane on Maple is it actually pushed the project, the sidewalks on the east side of the roadway. We were needing to push the first 300 to 600 feet. That sidewalk moved back into the front yard. It's like 5 feet. That was just untenable for Brookfield staff. None of us thought that would work. The 31st Street, adding the new lane, we were coming about 3 or 4 feet onto the sidewalk, moving back on those private properties. Those are all side frontages. They're not set back like 15, 20 feet. They're like
Right.
10 feet. Again, none of us thought that was tenable, and it also increases the impact to the gas stations with the widening on either one. One thing to note is even with the resurfacing, keeping the curbs where they're at, I think with the intersection improvements, getting new traffic signals, there still is a little bit of property effect on the
There might be some
corners,
corner
right?
clips that would be needed to install
Right.
temporary signals or, something like
Right.
that.
But it's minimal compared to the options with the widening. So that's why we came back with what's maybe not the best operationally, but would make some improvements of what we have. So I have a couple questions. One, President Garvey was asking about the trucks turning on and off from Maple on the 31st. I noticed we have the, Stevie, can we go back to that drawing where it was, I think it was option 3? Yep. So Mark, I see we're shifting the left turn lanes where they overlap the center. Is it an IDOT requirement to have those line up? We couldn't leave the left turn lanes kind of where they're at on the center line and keep the same turning radius? And you'd have offset left turn lanes if that was it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility, but the issue with the offset left turn lanes is that your line of sight, if you're trying to make a left turn going westbound and someone else is trying to make a left turn going eastbound, you're blocking each other's vision. And I think that's kind of like what the existing issue is out there right
Exactly.
now, that you're gonna not have the sight distance and, the number of crashes may not be reduced at all. by that.
Understood, yep, I agree. And just for clarity for the board, I want to express that. And then also, we do have a left turn signal on 31st Street with these to let some of these cars clear out of the left turn lanes. It's one
Yeah.
of the advantage,
Yeah,
right?
Derek, can I ask a question? So when you were talking about the left turn when you stop, and it's a red light and you stop to make that right turn for trucks to come make that right turn, like, that's not possible to have the left turn stopping point? What do you call it? Before the intersection, a certain
Set it
number of
back.
feet? Set it back, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something
that-
we would anticipate, right, where they've set back the left turn lane, like we have it at East Avenue
Right.
in Ogden, if
yeah,
we're
yeah,
familiar.
that could be a possibility, yeah, to provide more space that way.
So this turn lane, instead of being equal, would probably be set back in here. We can also look at larger radius improvements to help the truck turning. You weigh that against the impact of private property.
But is that the area where new signals might have to be? You said there might be issues with new signals. I mean, would that affect that particular corner, or is that where the signals might be, or?
I think there's signals on all the corners. I
Yeah.
think
It-
even without the turning radius, we need some widening to get, it's too tight now to
Sure.
meet codes. So even without improving that radius, we're gonna have to, or we're gonna need more room for sidewalk and that back, picture something like that, so we can get the signals in and meet current codes. I don't think they meet current codes. And when we go through with this design, the final design, if this is what's selected, one way to address the truck movements would be to make it a little larger radius. And again, we'll look at the impacts to each station, each corner.
And I know everyone local here realizes that's an intersection where we have a crossing guard there because the path to Brook Park School and what used to be St. Louis, I mean, we have a crossing guard there, so there's kids on that corner right there every morning, waiting, and that's always scary with the trucks, turning and cars turning, so obviously it's another reason it's so important, because it's a pathway to the schools.
And that would be something we can look into a little bit. I know for the northbound and southbound traffic, we have like a 13-foot wide left turn lane. That could be reduced to 11 feet or, something to allow a little bit more of an acceptance width for cars turning left into those areas. So those are some things that could be looked into. And yeah, just as far as increasing the curb radii, that would be, a possibility. I just know we've had experience with that with gas stations at other locations, and that's even become an issue, depending on how much you're taking from them.
And if I can, while I'm thinking of it, because we have Chief Adams here, Chief, can our biggest fire rig make that turn? I mean, we're talking about semis and trucks, but, I mean, that's a common route for you guys going to Cantata and the British Home and stuff, coming down Maple to 31st. I mean, have you,
Well, if they're gonna be widening for the bigger trucks, those need to swing wider than ours do. One of the reasons we actually bought the ladder truck that we have with the single axle, keeps our turning radius almost as tight as one of the fire engines now, so I don't foresee it being anything worse than we already have, you know what I mean? The guys still manage it fine.
thank you, Chief. I was thinking about that with the fire apparatus making that turn again, seeing the vehicles. And Chief Kerrville, at any time, if you have anything you want to add, I know you've been involved in this and looked at this, so, okay.
I have a couple questions just about the process. So you said that this is the least cost and most feasible option. Is this a cost that IDOT has to then agree to, that this is a project, we have to wait until the roads are getting redone years from now and do this? Is it something, if they approve it, we can decide to do and we pay for it with LaGrange Park? Like, what does that cost and what's the feasibility of us actually being able to do it?
At least, yeah, right now, the way this is going, this is all part of the Des Plaines River Trail Phase 1 project. So the Phase 1 report would have to be approved by IDOT first, and then would have to go to a Phase 2 design process, which Phase 2 design is actually developing plans for the contractor to build the intersection from, and then it would go into actual construction. So that whole process would, probably be a couple years following the IDOT, if it's gonna be federal funding paying for part of it, it has to go through IDOT's process.
And if I could add, so we were, usually our transportation council doesn't participate in Phase 1 costs. We were fortunate to be able to lump this study onto the bike path study, and it is being paid for mostly by the Transportation Council. We do anticipate going and trying to get federal funding, 80% federal share for the design and the construction. And as Mark says, just for a timing, because of the IDOT review and what you go through, if we got approval of this, as an example, by the end of '24, you're probably looking at 25, 26 type of a design. And if there's funding available, 27 is probably the earliest construction, but definitely looking at getting funding for this, for design and construction phases.
Thank you.
and
Not
how
like we
does
say,
the-
great, and do it.
And how does LaGrange Park play into that? Because we're talking 3 of the 4 are ours based, I mean, it's a joint application from LaGrange Park?
Yes, yeah, Tim helped me with the math, so they have 25% of the costs.
Right there with it, Aaron.
They pick up a quarter of the cost, and I should mention, they're very engaged with this. We met with them also. Mark might be going over to one of their board meetings soon, and really what we're here for, a lot of good points brought up about the truck radius and the more specific design details, but we had 3 options. And we just want to make sure before we further one option and try to get IDOT approval, that that's actually the board's preference too, is this option.
Well, and this option that we're recommending is LaGrange Park's staff's recommended option as well.
Okay. I'm sorry, Trustee Kaluzny, did you have other questions? I just wanted to,
I just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't like we just decide and we get to do it. It's a lot more steps,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
phases, they call them phases. And
Many phases involved.
Since this is a part of the DuPage River Trail, can I assume that at some point there will be improvements to the pedestrian and bicycle connections through this area as well?
Well,
Yeah,
oh, are you saying getting through to the intersection itself? There has been a tech memo that's been developed for that. But I believe, Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's been reviewed, and I don't believe that's gonna be the case for this
On
intersection.
31st Street?
Yeah, for it to be extended all the way to this intersection on 31st Street.
Correct. And you're talking about the South Des Plaines Trail?
Sorry,
correct? Yeah,
Des
and
Plaines,
I'm-
yeah,
just
not
clarity
DuPage.
for me, I didn't know. Yeah, there was an evaluation, yeah, a long history of how this got linked with the bike path, but I don't anticipate bike facilities running on 31st Street west of Prairie right now.
Okay.
At least that's staff's, we don't have much room for it on either side. They studied it, and I think the recommendation's gonna be a no-build alternative on that section. And I don't know that the village, I'll speak, I don't think the village was ever keenly desired that. I think part of it is we want an evaluation in case we were, but also to tie it in so this intersection design was linked to the bike path.
We were more focused
years
on
ago.
Prairie East to First Avenue.
We were, and that's still certainly ongoing, being studied, and will be part of the bike path improvements project.
Well, if there are any grants in the future for improving routes to schools, this might be another one to look at.
Okay.
I have a question about, I noticed in the accident summary sheet, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but over 70% of the accidents were east and westbound direction.
Yeah, that's correct.
So I was just curious whether, all the proposals were left turn lanes at all the legs. Was it ever considered to only do it on 31st? Going,
That was one thing where we figured that we had sufficient space on, like, the south leg of 31st is only 4 lanes for like the first maybe 100 feet, and then after that, that transitions to 3 lanes anyway. So we figured it would be, more of a natural progression to just have the 3-lane section on the north and south legs with the left turn, separate left turn lane in there.
okay.
And if I could address that somewhat anecdotally, because what's happening now, I think a left turn, going southbound and northbound would help on Maple, because what happens right now is people approach that intersection, specifically going southbound, and they turn left to get through to Prairie on Bartlett, 30th, Roach, through our residential streets to try to get through to Prairie, or they'll even just go down 30th or Roach to Park, and then just try and make a left-hand turn onto 31st Street. Right now, they're avoiding that intersection because there's no left turn lane and because the signals are messed up. They're going through our residential neighborhoods, including the area. They even started at 29th and 28th, and they go flying past Candy Cane Park. So I'd push for having, the guiding people to possibly just use the intersection with the left turn lane. If it was there, they might go through the neighborhoods less at a less speed.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I was just curious because of the way the numbers worked out, and I thought maybe with the trucks having difficulty turning onto 31st, and that might help, but maybe not. I was also curious, can you just talk a little bit about level of service and what that actually means, what the parameters are?
So level of service is kind of a way to measure the delay that's experienced within the intersection. So what IDOT, for the type of improvement that we're doing, IDOT will allow up to a level of service of D, which a level of service of A would be, essentially free flow traffic. A level of service of B would be, close to that, but a little bit of delay. A level of service of C, you might start seeing more delay. D might be a little bit more uncomfortable to travel through. And then kind of going to a level of service of F, you're probably sitting through the intersection through, maybe like one
light.
cycle or 2
Okay.
cycles before you get the opportunity to fully go through it.
Okay, thank you.
The Maple Park makes sense with the 3 for me because you're already gonna choke when you get to the south side of Maple anyways. It's already gonna choke down because you only have the 1 lane.
And as you sit right now, when you go through that section going north-south, there's so many people that end up turning left. If you're even going southbound on it, coming from the forest area going across, most people already know to whip out into the right lane to go through and then come across. It does bring forward, though, if we were to do that, the 3 lanes, that first house after the gas station on the south side, they usually have a car parked like right there, so you got to barely, I don't know if they lose a parking spot or how, if we can do it so that, because it's kind of close when you're coming around and going around. But that part makes sense with the 3 legs. I do struggle with the east-west part, because then you are choking it down. So if we have a dedicated turn lane, so right now, if nobody's making a left onto Maple Avenue, either direction, if nobody's making a left on there, you have free flow, both lanes are going through. But now we're gonna choke it up early, and then you funnel it down to 1 lane, and then you open it back up to 2 lanes again. I mean, to me, that you would actually cause more traffic, more delay in the long run. I personally prefer the 5, to be honest with you. I don't know how feasible that is going forward with the gas stations because of how the setback is. But I think that if we go to 3 lanes on 31st Street, that causes a bigger choke point. That traffic during rush hour, as it is now, is pretty thick. And then if you funnel everybody into 1 lane, I mean, as soon as somebody turns, it throws everything out of whack. As soon as you turn, everything gets thrown out of whack. But if that one person doesn't turn, then it opens back up. And then, so if you have a dedicated turn lane, you're gonna have to choke all the time, as opposed to only when somebody's turning. So, I mean, I prefer if we could go 5 on the east-west. The north-south part on Maple, that makes complete sense to me, because you're already choking it as it is. For lack of a better term, you already have a choke point. But I think that we would create more traffic backlog on east-west if we go to 3 as opposed to 5. My preference is 5 on the east-west.
So some thoughts on that with staff discussion. So when it's not a peak hour, the 1 through lane is likely enough to get the cars through as it is. And it's all during the peak hour. My observation is during the peak hour, you're getting a lot of left turns on most cycles. Like it's effectively a 1 through lane for a lot of the cycle anyhow, because you have someone turning left onto Maple. What we're trying to do is provide some clarity here, so people right now, as you come up there, if you're in that middle lane, you're wondering if someone's going left, and then you have to, I'll say, dart out into that curb lane. So what we're doing, again, on Maple, it's the same thing. What you point out is we're just providing clarity to what already happens there pretty frequently. We've done this before. If you remember when we improved Graham Boulevard, going northbound at 31st Street, remember sometimes people would take that left, sometimes they wouldn't. So we just provided some clarity there, and we put a dedicated left turn, and we made that curb lane the through lane or right turn. So that's similar to what's being proposed on the Maple intersection in both directions, which I know it sound like you agreed with. 31st during the peak, you're right. And Mark, I think the level of service, if I'm looking, didn't, and again, this is by the program, but did it not decrease on 31st, or is it?
Yeah, it goes from A to C for East Leg.
And any discussion on that, Mark? Again, I'm seeing a lot of, so that's
Well, and I guess the one thing to emphasize here is that the top chart is based on existing traffic, and the bottom 2 charts are based on year 2050 traffic. So the volumes for the 2050 have been probably increased. I forget what the rate was, but it's probably somewhere around 3% a year or so. But, east and west leg have, decreased versus existing within this area, but it's still a relatively good level of service for that.
Can you clarify, what is full cycle and half cycle?
Okay, so right now, the way the intersections run, there's all the intersections along 31st Street are coordinated with, I forget how many, miles it is, but they all have the same cycle length. So a cycle is one, it'll go from like an eastbound green, progress all the way through, and then start up again with an eastbound green. So currently, that's taking about 130 seconds or, over 2 minutes for a cycle to complete in one direction. If you go with and that's for all the intersections here, so that's gonna help traffic kind of progress through. If you take half of that, the intersection cycle length is like, you might get, say 30 seconds of a green going eastbound with the longer cycle. If you do it the half cycle, you might get 15 seconds of green. But if you're on the side street, or let me rephrase it, if you'll get the extra green, but you'll also be waiting longer until you get the green again.
I'm really confused with that
Okay.
answer. What's the right answer? What is it? I said he's heard me complain about this for years. Maple is way too long, the red light on Maple. You go the next light to the East Prairie, it's normal. I cross the Prairie because it's a much quicker green light to make the left turn onto 31st Street. So we've all been told that IDOT acknowledges that Maple is red for way too long. So I guess that would be your full cycle. But that's wrong. It's incorrect, and IDOT has acknowledged it's only that way because this detector doesn't work. So do I understand you to mean then the half cycle is the correct cycling of the
When we analyzed the half cycle, it gave us a better level of service than the full cycle. And I think part of that is if you're if you have a 2-minute cycle and you go through, when you get the red light, you're going to be waiting for a longer period of time until the green comes again.
So what is, do you know what Prairie and 31st signal is? Is that a half cycle?
That's a half cycle. So you're gonna get a green more frequently, but it's gonna be for a shorter duration of time. Yeah, and if you have the full cycle, you're gonna get a longer green, but it's not gonna be as frequent as the half cycle. So if you have the longer period where you have a red light, you're gonna get more traffic queuing up during that time.
Okay, so why would the village ever choose a full cycle if that gives you an F on the north leg? Why would we choose anything that gives a worse rating?
So it depends on the way the signal is phased. So some of the phasing will be, you have like a left turn green, and then you have a yellow, and then you have to have just like all red for a period of time, and then you'll get the green through movement. So that's like 3 phases for, say, eastbound, westbound traffic. And then if you have something similar for northbound, southbound, where you have the green for the left, yellow for the left, and then an all red, you have 3 phases for that. So you can have like 6 phases operating during the whole cycle.
But I mean, we don't choose the phases, the Village of Brookfield doesn't choose the phases.
No, that's something that the traffic engineer or IDOT will determine. The one thing that we did for the bottom one is with the half cycle, you only have 60 seconds or 65 seconds for the whole cycle to run through. So we kind of analyzed it in just a simplified manner to eliminate some of the, just left turn only phases and that. So that provided some more time for the through movements to go. And, for some of the intersections like on Maple, there's, not that much left turning traffic to justify, a full like 8 to 10 seconds of, green arrow for that.
But for purpose of our discussion, the phasing's not really something we should focus on because we can't control it, and it's going to be dependent on which option is ultimately determined going forward. It'll be
Right.
determined what's the most,
Ultimately, what we'll need to provide to IDOT is the analysis, kind of similar to what is provided in the packets here, that, you know, proves to IDOT that you do get an acceptable level of service, and we have kind of the phasing indicated here that makes it work, and that they'd be the ones who'd review that and, you know, either approve or disapprove of it.
so, go ahead, trustee Kitcher.
Is your analysis based on the way it is now, which we're acknowledging isn't right because the detectors?
The detector loops are.
So is it based on the way it is now or the way it should be with those working correctly?
This is based on the way it should be with those working correctly for the
Okay,
existing.
so it's not the
is-
way it is now, which we
We
acknowledge wrong.
we didn't put in, you know, the exact time that, you know, Maple has a red light. We just put it into the software that we used, and it optimizes everything. So existing is, you know, what it could be if everything was,
Okay.
you know, just optimized with the existing values in it.
So what I'm looking for is some kind of consensus from the board on these options. I mean, staff made the recommendation, and Derek indicated what LaGrange Park's staff, at least recommendation, it's my understanding it's been addressed by their village board. And I truly understand trustee Cote's 5-lane analysis. I'm glad trustee Kaluzny was the one that brought it up, that if we take the least impactful, the least expensive, we're still talking 26, 27. If we're talking about the 5-lane option, which may be ultimately the ideal solution for making traffic flow as quickly as possible to the intersection, I venture that that's less likely to succeed because it's a greater commitment of funds, and it's going to take more time because there is basically land acquisition and everything else. And I'm not saying that we just choose the quickest, shortest option. It's just that there would be an improvement in safety already. I mean, when the comment was made, and I truly understand and appreciate, there have been no fatal accidents at that intersection. I mean, it's actually pretty surprising that there haven't at this point. And I'm more worried about pedestrians than, you know, maybe vehicle traffic and stuff, but I understand why staff's recommending the current recommendation because it's the most likely to succeed, the most likely to happen, and would provide some relief, and it's the relief that I've heard most residents basically ask for. As with any change, there will be a major learning curve, there'll be a major inconvenience, and will be cursed and yelled at for years when it goes into place and there's traffic backups and it takes you longer to get through that intersection. But that's what I'm looking for, is that, you know, what's the board's desire to make a recommendation going forward?
I support the 3-lane.
Trustee Nermetz?
I support the 3-lane too. I do have one more question, but I
Sure,
don't want to.
as many questions, yeah, I'm just trying to narrow down the issues here.
I support the 3-lane. I did have one more question about that intersection that we just talked about that's right prior to that, the Prairie one that we all go on because it's quicker. Is that has a left turn lane. It has a left turn signal, but no left turn lane, only in one direction. And is that going to be, is that taken into consideration? Like that there's already a left turn right beforehand and now you've got another left turn? I just wonder if it's a issue with IDOT on that.
So do you understand, as you come westbound on 31st at Prairie, there is a left turn lane?
Left turn
The
signal.
Left turn
signal, even though there's
signal.
no left turn lane.
Yeah, right.
So-
Right.
Yes.
So essentially, if you're like one of the
If you're
first
the
few
first car, you
cars
can go.
in the queue, you can make the left without
Yeah, but
causing
the third car
issues.
is messed up.
Third car can't go. You're gonna wait.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that that happened before I moved here, but I'm just curious, like.
But
that's
I've
interesting to
noticed
other-
that there's an improvement in the flow there since that happened. I know it's only, that there's,
Isn't it a green arrow?
It is, it's a green
and
arrow
light?
and a solid green, so when you're going
Right.
westbound, both lanes do move.
Yeah, and then the
No, but
folks going eastbound.
but it's
can't.
it's a left turn, it's an arrow and a green light
Yes.
Yes.
when you're heading west, right?
yes.
I think the difference between that, the intersections is much less left turns on Prairie, so we don't have the issues of 31st turning onto Maple, where I don't have counts, but just from observation, I think there's much less cars turning left there. But the question I think you were asking is, would IDOT allow us to put this left turn lane in on Maple while we have one that's not striped for a left turn up
Just wondering if
half a mile
impacts
or
To
so?
revise the signals to provide a left turn.
She's
at
just
first.
asking if we can do what we're doing on Maple without changing, if I understood you right. Because they won't
Right,
be
without doing
similar, and I would think they would, because they're different intersections when you look at the operation of them.
Right. Yeah, that would be something we'd have to, coordinate with IDOT to see how they would feel about it.
I like that one too. I don't want them to take that one
Don't want
away.
to lose it, and I agree.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so trustee Hendricks, did you indicate that you were in favor of?
Yeah, I would be uncomfortable impacting private property. I think that the data supports the 3 lanes.
All right, so and trustee Cote did voice his concern, and I agree
3 and
with
5, yeah.
3 and 5, but it seems like the consensus of the board at this point is to go along with staff's recommendation for the 3 lanes
I
each way.
raise my fist at all of you.
So, does that give you enough direction at this point to move this along? And thank you very much for the detailed analysis and report, and this is a topic that we've all been familiar with for a very long period of time, and it's, again, trustee Kaluzny asked the question that was all, best case scenario, we're still talking 2026, 2027, but if we don't start taking advantage of the work we've done already, it's going to be even longer, so. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the second item we have is discussion regarding proposed streetscape improvements on Grand Boulevard and Brookfield. This is a return topic. We talked about it 2 weeks ago, and I'm just going to turn it over to Derek because there's been a lot of staff and some board members and work and input since the last meeting. And again, detailed memo, but Derek, you want to lead us through what's happened since the last meeting and what the options are for the board here?
Sure, thank you. So as you mentioned, President Garvey, we had good discussion at the last board meeting. Staff went back to the drawing board based on some of the questions and input we got. Did loop in 2 trustees, try and get a little more detailed input from them. Just as a reminder, I'll start out with the scope of work that we discussed on 3700 block of Grand Boulevard. We have full sidewalk replacement. We agreed on a 2-foot strip of brick pavers. We're going to have street lighting and tree grates or planter areas were on the board. Then on Brookfield Avenue, we have brick pavers on the south side, just from Prairie Avenue to the sculpture, which is about 135 feet. And then we had agreed on pedestrian level lighting on the north side from Prairie to Arden. So really, it boiled down to we're looking for decisions on 3 items here. 1 is street lighting, 2 is the tree grates and the planter areas, and then as part of our meeting with the small group, it was suggested that we look into bollards or a seat wall at the northeast corner of Brookfield Avenue and Grand Boulevard, and I think at least with staff and the small group, that had a lot of support. So we'll get into our decisions. First one I think is just, I'm looking for consensus on this. My take from the last meeting is we presented options of roadway poles, combination poles, or pedestrian light poles on 3700 block of Grand. Believe the consensus was pedestrian light poles. We'd put them in at a staggered 60-foot spacing, similar to what's out there now. Can you flip to the next one? Again, I think we're all familiar with the style of the pedestrian poles. Those are about 15 foot high. That's the one on the bridge to the left. And that's just a detail of a typical pole that we would install. And the next slide will show there's the staggered spacing. So you typically either look at an opposite, where they're opposite each other on the streets. What we currently have out there is a staggered spacing. We're proposing to keep that spacing now with the lighting, so that'll put those lights approximately back right where they're at. So
Okay, so.
first would be just consensus on,
Sure.
do I have the understanding correct from last meeting?
Okay. How does the board feel about the lighting I mean, I think Derek summarized what we're talking about, the pedestrian lights only, not the street lighting, not the higher, brighter street lighting, pedestrian lights, the spacing and the height of the pole.
I thought this is what we agreed to.
Well, I think there was, I mean, I think we wanted at least to see some design and maybe pictures of it and what it would look like in the spacing and things. So I think you're right, but I didn't want it, and staff didn't want to take it for granted that the decision had been made. But if there's a clear consensus from the board on the lighting options expressed here by staff, then yes.
Can I have I just have one question on the light poles. The ones they have now are just kind of like, they're not like a hook like this. So
Yeah.
does the light go onto the street or onto the sidewalk?
The,
Like
The
does
lights
it
would be-
overhang onto the,
Yeah.
towards the buildings or towards the street?
towards the street,
Got it.
yeah.
Thanks. Right now, they're just straight up fixtures, right?
They're post-mounted, exactly, right. We're looking at something similar to what we have out on Broadway, and again, we tried to match that with the bridge, and we'll get into, there's a lot, this is a concept level discussion, so we could advance the design. We'll show you recommendations for the exact mast arm, where the banners are, that'll all come later, but yes, it'll match, it'll be similar to what we have out on Broadway and on the bridge.
And is there, I mean, we have like string lighting and street lighting, like string lights along there now. I mean, these poles have that ability to carry that or have that?
They will, right, and there's in the last slide, I list some amenities that we'll certainly work through all the details with staff. But yes, those banners, arms for the planters, all are in play here, and I anticipate, quite frankly, we'll have them, maybe whether it's every pole or every other pole, for instance, the planters on the hanging planters.
All right, so one down. We got two
Well,
more.
here, Stevie, could you go back to the slide you had up that showed the bump outs right there at the end? The one you're paging
I
through.
think that was Google Earth.
Well, do we look to moving? I mean, those street lights were at where they were at, and we did the bump out. Is that something we look to maybe moving that out more?
Oh, yeah, that one.
Yeah, we're not locked into that location. Again, I haven't really proposed that we will or won't, but yes, we can look at those locations at the bump outs. You're right, those are the original locations prior to the bump out.
Because that light there wouldn't be shining on a street, it would be shining on the sidewalk.
Right,
And I think you might have it across the street then as well, right?
yep.
No, maybe not there.
Yeah, it's a setback a little maybe.
Okay.
Again, moving forward, I anticipate a group of staff, maybe one or two of the trustees wants to be on there, and we work out these details, like locations like that will certainly be worked out. It's not something we'll just do on our own. We'll work with staff and the design group. There you go. Thank you. So next decision, again, I think had a consensus, just want to confirm, but the lighting design for Brookfield Avenue was, again, pedestrian light poles, approximately 60-foot spacing, similar to what we have on Grand. It ends up being about 20 pedestrian lights from Prairie to Arden, and again, they're 15-foot tall. I know this slide doesn't show up well here, but it shows I think you have it in your packet. It shows the locations, again, just at a 60-foot spacing. I will mention that I think the lighting that from Prairie all the way to the east side of the Village Hall driveway, we for sure want to do. We're showing going to Arden in the concept plan. When we met with the group, it is noted that between the Village Hall driveway and Arden, very dense tree cover. Don't really want to take those trees down, so during the final design, we're gonna work through the details. If we can't fit them, there's a chance we would choose to forego those. One option we could look at, we want to stay in the right-of-way. We don't want to get, even though it's our property, on the federally funded project, it would be much better to stay in our right-of-way. But we might, if we had to, we might be able to put those lights at the back of Walk. So we'll look into that in more detail if this is the design option we pursue. Just looking for consensus, pedestrian level lights, Prairie to Arden, correct?
Everybody okay with that? You know, and obviously that area, you know, east of, you know, the Village Hall entry and Arden, I mean, that's along Overholt Field and, I mean,
Is it just on the one side of the street? Just on the
On the
north side of the
side.
street?
Yeah.
because we have the
That's-
commuter parking and the lighting over there, that's the railroad, basically.
Right.
Is there lighting? Sorry, I'm not
Yeah, no,
trying
I
to
get
picture
it.
that lighting on the other side. But we don't need the roadway lighting because there is light on the other side as well. So the pedestrian lighting is okay?
Right, and to be clear, most of our roadways, including our collectors, don't meet minimum, and here's the word, recommended, not required, lighting levels, okay? Even the ones with, some of them like Grand Boulevard with the concrete light poles, looking at the spacing, haven't been out there with the light meter, but just based on the spacing, I don't expect that Grand Boulevard, even with the lighting as frequently as it is, meets minimum recommended levels. So we're not having, I'll go into these when we talk the intersections, we're not really having a bunch of nighttime accidents. I don't think it's a safety issue. So bottom line, I think we're only improving it, but we're not meeting minimum recommended levels.
Thanks.
Okay. So consensus on the Brookfield Avenue lighting design, yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the board did ask us to look at a couple intersection lighting designs, one at Brookfield Grand Prairie and the second at Grant and Sunnyside. The next bullet point applies to both of those locations. You have a choice, a roadway pole. Could you flip over, Stevie, to the pic? There's a picture at Veteran Circle. That's a roadway pole, about 25 to 30 foot high. Next picture, that's a picture of a combination pole. It's a little hard to see on the right side of that pole, but that's a pedestrian, thank you, Stevie. That's a pedestrian light hanging off of the backside. So we'll refer to that as combination pole. And of course, we're all familiar with the pedestrian pole. So at these intersections, we have the option for any of those three. I'll go through the lighting design we did on so the intersection of Brookfield, Prairie, and Grand is a very large intersection, and it's really difficult to cover the center of that intersection with lights that are on the corner. We did find a way we can get it lit and meet minimum recommended standards. However, we had to install 10 lights on that corner. There's 5 intersections. There's 2 per corner. I did ask Chief Mike to look into the accident history, 3-year accident history. We only had a total of 8 accidents, which is not high, and only 1 nighttime accident in 3 years. So, the point being that I really don't think we have a safety issue out there based on the light level. But we can still certainly improve it with the roadway or combination lights. If we're gonna install those, total of 10 lights, and cost is $150,000. I will point out, there's 2 roadway lights on the south side right now. We have to coordinate that with BNSF. They worry how close you get with your lighting to the railroad tracks. I think one of the things they're worried, if you have a knockdown, they don't want the pole extending across the tracks. I think we all understand that. We may not be able, I think the 2 poles out there, I'm not sure would meet those requirements. So if we do go with roadway or combination lighting, it'll be set back further from the tracks to meet those requirements.
Would the other lights be like on the apex of the bump outs? Is that where they would be? Or-
They would. I have a, can you go back, Stevie, I had a slide, and again, this isn't gonna show up great, but yes, they're at each of those. There's actually 5 corners, and there's 2 lights at each of the 5 corners. And I know you can't see on this, maybe you could on the packet, was a little better, but to get that lighting to cast across that whole intersection, we needed to put 2 lights on each, and they basically the heads face in different directions to get the coverage.
I personally like the combo, if that's what we're looking for here. I like the combination because you'll still have the pedestrian, but then you have the street one. I like the combination one.
Yeah, are my recommendations on the next slide. Yeah, and the recommendation was actually I don't know that we want the 10, and this is probably more my recommendation is, I don't know that you need the 10 roadway lights. We're not having a safety issue out there. I thought you might keep the road, we do have existing roadway lights on the south. Can we show that on the Google Earth, Stevie, on the, we do have a couple roadway lights out there now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought maybe following somewhat of a similar design where we'd light up the track crossing well, get some roadway lighting up there. We'd have two lights on, one light on each corners, total of two. And then I thought we could leave on the north side, we'd continue that pedestrian lighting scheme that we have up and down Grand. Helps lights the sidewalks, it's gonna cast more light on the crosswalks also. But there's nothing wrong with the roadway lights either, so I'm looking for some good board discussion and input on this item.
I like Derek's recommendation for this.
I'm good with that.
Getting some head nods over on this side. Katie, what do
So
you,
you're saying the roadway lights on the south part of the intersection towards the tracks, no
Yes.
roadway height lights on those other three bump outs?
Right, we'd put additional, like we'd have more pedestrian lighting on those corners, but, right. Kind of, to me, it led to a kind of a consistent feel, whereas as you cross the intersection, we get into the pedestrian lights, but when we're up by the tracks, we would have the roadway lights.
Do we do the combo lights up other tracks? I don't,
Can do any,
You have
there's
both.
no wrong answer, yes, you
because you
could
just have
do,
people walking up and down. I don't know. I don't know if the roadway's enough, I guess it's unnecessary to have the pedestrian lights. But if we're worried about coverage or minimum recommended,
the roadway actually provides more lighting. Yeah, it'd be adequate lighting with just the roadway alone, but there is the aesthetic, if you like
Yeah, I like
hanging that off the back. I'll tell you, when we looked at it on Grand, it can also cause it to get too bright and you get glare. I'd have to look at that, but if that's the recommendation or choice of the board for combo lights on the south side, we can definitely bring that back and make sure that we don't have a glare problem.
I'm interested in checking out the combo, because also it just kind of connects the business district
yeah.
as well, so you're continuing that pedestrian lighting across the bridge, but if it's a metro problem, then I get it.
would the pedestrian part add any metric concern? I mean, just the poles in general are a metric concern. I don't know how.
Right, it's the roadway portion, because that's what makes, I
higher
don't
part.
think hanging a pedestrian off the roadway is gonna
You just worry about the
increase the
glare.
problem.
You're just gonna worry about the glare at that point then.
Just don't worry
If
about it.
we did the combo with the pedestrian and roadway at the same, on that,
Right.
you just worry about the glare of the cars
Yes.
going over.
Right, we'll run those calcs, so I can send that information back to staff and confirm that the combo lights either work or don't, if that's the,
How does
Consensus
the rest of the board feel about the possibility of the combo lights on the south
Combo lights.
street lights?
I think what trustee Kaluzny said makes sense, that it provides continuity.
So if it's, I know, because I know we have to move this along with the deadline and stuff, so basically, if it's an option where there's not a glare problem, I mean, the consensus from the board, we'd like that to happen, but if there's a glare issue or significant issue, I mean, I don't, you want something cleared up tonight where we don't have to bring it back to the board, right?
I think that's good enough direction,
Sure.
and if I can't get the combos to work, or if we run into issues during design with the roadway even,
Sure,
about how close they are, we'll share that with village staff.
okay,
Okay.
perfect.
And before, this is a good slide, but before we go to that, I want to mention something, so I think we're all aware we're making the Burlington Avenue improvements this year. I'm hopeful we can find some funding and make a lot of sense to light up the south side of the tracks in the same manner, and at least that intersection. We don't, there are plans to go east and west of Prairie, and that was in our ITEP application, but I think for what would probably be 4 to 6 lights, we could go ahead and light up the south side of the tracks the same way the north side is.
So
that
just
doesn't-
the intersection of Prairie and Burlington, basically?
Say,
So just the intersection of Prairie and Burlington?
yes, and to be clear, wouldn't be part of this project, I'm just kind of
Right.
putting on everybody's radar, we'll bring
continuity.
it back, but is there consensus, is that worth
I like
talking
that.
about here tonight?
It does make sense. That is an area that is seemingly, it's low lit. You know, people coming over the tracks, and you have people coming out of Irish Times and you know, that area, so, and, you know, commuters walking in that area too, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the second intersection we were asked to look at was at Brookfield, whoop, wrong side, Grand and Grant. Again, roadway or combination lights, it would require, can you flip to the drawings? Thank you, Stevie. So we basically have 6 corners at this intersection. Would require 1 light on each corner to light up that roadway. 6 lights total. Again, I looked at the 3-year accident history. It was just 2 nighttime accidents, not a big safety issue due to lack of lighting. If we put the 6 roadway lights in, then we would estimate a cost is $100,000. Village share is $20,000, just to give you numbers. If we could go to that next slide, Stevie. So what I'd like to recommend on this is I had mentioned at the last meeting that we currently have the concrete poles down Grand. They actually run to the circle and then from the circle all the way to 31st Street. I think as a future improvement, hopefully near future, I think it's a great improvement to tie the lighting on Grand to the lighting on Broadway. And the reason I bring it up is depending on what type of lighting we put on the 2 blocks of Grand from Grant to the circle may impact what we do here at the circle. It's currently roadway lighting on Grand from Grant to the circle. I don't believe it's gonna meet minimum recommended lighting levels. If we felt that we were gonna put pedestrian lighting for those next 2 blocks, then I think this intersection would certainly be pedestrian lighting. If we feel the long-term plan is to install roadway or combo poles for the 2 blocks north of Grant, then we can look at where, if we want to transition in this intersection to roadway or combo, or whether we want to keep pedestrian till we get to the north side of Grant. And I'll tell you, I'm looking for a lot of input. If we need 2 more weeks and everyone wants to think about this a little, that's okay. We have a lot of other items to design, but does that make sense what I'm presenting?
I think you've laid out the issue and the options for the board. Is there any member, board, I mean, I think you all understand the issue, but any input at this point in time? Is it something you need more time on this particular topic, or?
I'd love some pedestrian level lighting the rest of the way down Grand. I walk it a lot from the train, and I don't think the roadway level lighting makes you feel like you have the adequate light. So I'd say it's a combo light or pedestrian the rest of the way.
I agree with Katie. I mean, trustee Calusi.
And I think my preference is probably the combo, because I do, and starting at this intersection north, having walked it today and really looked at it, I think because of the height of the trees and the density there, the combo would work.
Okay.
I mean, that's residential blocks there, basically, you know, I mean, as we start to move, I mean, in that area, I mean, is there any concern about we're changing the character of those residential blocks where you're?
It's changing for the better.
I do too.
I'm not saying it is, it's, if you live in one of those homes, you're gonna have obviously with the design of the lights, they're not going into the homes or anything, they're just lighting up the sidewalks better.
Well, speaking as someone who lives on Grand with one of these light poles in my front yard, these look very utilitarian, and I think that combo light with the roadway and the pedestrian would be an improvement in character.
I don't favor one or the other. I will point out, like, changing the character. There are roadway lights now, so we're not, if it was pedestrian now or just even the ComEd poles at the corners and middle block, I think you would be changing the character, but there are roadway lights out there now on Grand, just for your.
No, and I realize the roadway lights are there, just the combo, you're basically lighting up
The pedestrian.
pedestrian sidewalks in front of homes, you know,
Right.
that stretch there. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing, I'm just saying it's definitely changing the character.
I'll take some lighting levels out there now. I'll give you a spacing. I'll send some information. Maybe that's something we can have a brief discussion on at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Or
wonder
if
if
you
that's
have
like an alternating situation. Were you talking about that on Grand with the taller, lower?
Yeah, I'll look at that. Typically on roadway, the IDOT, and I don't think we're held to it, you get better lighting if you go alternate, so you don't stagger. But I'll research that a little too.
Just because I feel like the pedestrian lighting would be spaced out pretty far if it was just replacing where they are currently.
Correct. I'm gonna have to get you spacing. I think the spacing will be closer together. We'll be, for instance, and I don't know how many, but if we had 6 lights, we'll probably have 7 or 8 on a block. It'll be a shorter spacing to meet the roadway levels,
Nice.
lighting levels.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. And now we get into our tree grates and planters. So when staff first met, there were certain aspects of the curb planters that we liked better. We liked that they kept the salt runoff away from the soil, and we feel they have less future maintenance than the tree grates. However, we have about 10.5 feet from the building to the back of curb. It's pretty narrow. We only have about a 5-foot width from the back of curb to the main sidewalk to install the curb planters. And if we could flip to the next detail, that's just a reminder of what the curb planters look like. I think we all know by now. Another blow up. If we could hit the next one, I have some dimensions on there. So we also have the angled parking. Had a lot of comments about the overhang, and they're valid. So an overhang on a vehicle on this angle parking is estimated 12 to 18 inches. Ideally, we'd like 18 inches of clearance. We showed it at 12 just to see what kind of clearance. We have 1 foot of that 5-foot space taken up by the offset to allow a vehicle overhang. Now we only have 4 foot of effective space, and when we put a 6-inch wide perimeter curb around it, we end up with a 3-foot planter. And staff, the small group we met with, the consensus was we just don't think we have the right location to put the curb planters in. It's just too narrow. It won't have we didn't feel it would have the look that we liked. There were other concerns too that were brought up at the last board meeting about when people get out of their cars and exit. If you're right in front of the planter, some spots you're either gonna have to walk over the planter. I know there's the 1-foot space, but vehicles may be overhanging into that. Ultimately, we've kind of changed our tune, and go to the next slide. We're recommending we go back in with tree grates. We have a couple options. One design you see often is a perimeter curb around there. So, and I say curb, it's at grade, but a perimeter concrete strip is a better way to describe it. It's a little easier for construction. If we put the 6-inch curb around the perimeter, obviously we'd only have a 4x4 tree grate within there. I'll address, I know there's some root concerns. We do have some ideas about that if we go with this tree grate. The second option is we put in a 5-foot by 5-foot tree grate. Again, we don't have room to put that perimeter curb in. We do have this picture doesn't show what our design is, but we have a 2-foot strip of curb, so just trying to figure out when you install these, what's not shown on the perimeters, there's an angle iron that sits around the perimeter. That's what those tree grates rest on. When it's up against concrete, that's fine. We pour a little lip on there and we embed the angle iron in. The brick pavers create a little more challenge for how to do that, but we can get it done. If that's what the board prefers is this look, we can get a design done. So this would be the 5x5. Some options before we leave this. They are in 2 pieces, so they can be removed. The tree grates consist of 2 pieces. There's a joint down the middle. You can remove these, maintain them, and then reset them. It's not just one piece. And they do offer tree grates where they have those rings around the tree can snap off. So in case this trunk starts getting larger, PW can pull those out and snap those off. And that's what we'd propose that we look for. To make the circle bigger. Yeah, you take the grates out and you can snap off the sections that are ring. You can kind of see how, I'm not sure this is one, but you could kind of see how it's segmented there, and you can snap off like this ring, as things get larger. And if we could go to the next one. So I mentioned the other day, the brand name is Silvacell, but it's a modular suspended pavement system. And what you're trying to do is two things. It's a way of creating additional room beneath these. It's not under just the tree grate. It extends under the sidewalk and the pavers, and it gives you more room for root growth. It also allows more water to get into there. On this detail off to the left, you see a little, like a yard drain. It brings in additional runoff and water. I'm not sure we'll need those. If we can grade the sidewalk so we have enough area sloping to it, we'll try to get away without the yard drains. I have a couple more pictures of the Silvacells. Yeah, that's a little blow up. Just a description, we have used these. They're somewhat new, but we've used these on a previous project out in Park Ridge. They did a permeable paver parking lot. It's basically a grid of PVC tubes. You fill in all these voids here. This is during the installation process. You fill it in with an amended soil that the roots can go through, and then you pack on top of that. Can we go to the next one? You can see that there's a plate that goes on top of those. Those circles are the PVC tubes, and you keep backfilling. You put those plates on it, put a filter fabric over it, and then you could put your stone bedding for the pavers or sidewalk. The one we did was installed in '21, so it's been about 2 full years, and we haven't seen any settlement over there. So we would propose to use these at our tree grate locations. I'd open up the discussion from the board. I know there's a lot there on this one.
Those are cool. I like it. I like using the runoff water to help water them too.
It's good that they have under drains as well, because surprisingly, some of these trees can sit in too much water.
Get too much, right, right. That's not usually the problem in an urban environment, but you're right.
I hate, what's the cost difference between the various options? I mean,
You kind of got me there. I didn't look up our costs. I will say this, there are, at the 20%, being 20% local share, I guess I would encourage the board to do what they think's best. I really don't know. I'd be guessing it might be 10 grand a piece, and there's, I forget how many trees we have, 12 or 13 currently, but your cost is probably in a range of 25 grand on your share. And I can send information on that better, but I think I would do whatever you prefer. We've struggled so much with the getting the trees to grow in our business districts. I'd like to do something, and
I just brought up the money because Doug's always staring me down, and if I don't ask about money, I just,
Is he holding up signs?
his facial expressions during the various options. So here, let me try and do my job here with is the idea of the curbed planters, is that still on anyone's radar based on what staff's presented and the trustee input?
No, but I really like those.
I do
so
too.
Look forward to talking about that in a minute.
Okay, so there's no one that's, pushing the curb planter anymore, so that eliminates that option. The 4x4 tree gate, am I correct that option that the 5x5 has with the inner removable rings expansion isn't available in the 4x4?
no, it's available in both.
Okay, it's okay. So kind of got it down to 4x4, 5x5, and the Silvacells. From a public works input maintenance type issue, any, Rocco, Vince, anything you want to throw out? I mean, I know you guys can do anything, but is,
No, after discussions with this, I think that we will be able to make this work. And in the winter, we're looking for a process, maybe whether it is a fabric that would go underneath those grates and sit recessed to prevent the salt from infiltrating into the soil, and doing soil treatment if necessary in order to preserve the trees.
that's why, I mean, because when we had to move away from the raised, the curbed planter, the one of the benefits of that was that the salt runoff, I mean, obviously, we're so close to the curb line, and when the plows go down, we're salting the sidewalks, we're salting the streets, the plows go down, or throwing up salt on these things. That was my question, is how do the 4x4, the 5x5, and the Silva deal with salt runoff?
And I think one of the things Vince brought up is, again, put some sort of a filter fabric to reduce the amount that gets in there, but also if we find we can go out, test the pH of the soil in the spring, and if we need to amend the pH, there are ways to do that. So that was our.
And because I assume it's not unique to us, salt getting into trees. I mean, I'm assuming there's the best practices and things that so out of the three options we're considering, is one any better or any worse for the salt issue, 4x4, 5x5, or the Silva cells? Or are they all pretty much the same?
I don't think there's a significant, the Silva cells help. They give you, that tree will have much more room for root growth down there, have more water. It's gonna be a stronger tree that can tolerate the salt issue better. I think putting it in a small 4x4, 5x5 pit puts it at a disadvantage already. So I would say the Silva cell's a good option. And then as far as the size of the tree grade, I don't think there's a significant difference in how much salt gets in either one.
Is there any photo of what the Silva, I mean, we have like the street level, like the aerial view of what the 4x4 and 5x5 looks at as you're walking down. We have cross sections on the Silva, like what would it look like?
On the surface?
Yes.
It's all underground. So it's a base. Can we go back? Yeah, blow that up. So this isn't great, but what you're seeing on the top of there, here, maybe I can, this is like the brick pavers or the concrete. The Silva cells are actually down here.
Right.
So if you go to the next slide, Stevie, so what you're seeing here are those PVC posts right here, and then they put that grid on top of it, but then you have a little stone in the base. It's all below ground, the Silva cell.
So in that, but what's that area where it's showing the gaps in the surface? I mean, there's no gaps on the surface as you walk?
No.
So you would just see solid sidewalk or pavers or?
Yes.
Okay.
It'll look just like the rest of the street.
And then when you get to the base of the tree, what would you see at the base of the tree?
Yeah, you're gonna see the tree grate and you'll see soil above it, just like the Silva cell is all,
Okay.
it's all below ground.
But there's some kind of grate, how big is the grate at that point, or?
When I'm saying the grate, it's the cast iron tree grate. All of, you won't
Okay.
see any of this
Okay.
plastic. This is all substructure that's 6 to 12 inches below the surface.
Okay.
What it does is it provides you just with some storage below. If you just put the soil in, then you'd be worried about settlement. This is basically providing some
Base.
support for hardscape improvements above the amended soil below where the roots grow.
What we're trying to address is, as Derek mentioned, there's so many of our trees along Grand and Broadway.
No, that don't survive.
This was not done. We did not use or know about Silva cells. So our assumption is that we have smaller grades that don't accommodate necessarily the trunk, and underneath the surface of the ground, we did not accommodate, the village did not accommodate space for roots to grow. So what we've gotten is kind of a crapshoot of trees that some of them survive, but most have not.
Are these the type of things that the problem, like the roots system's gonna lift or raise the sidewalk or get into sewer lines, some of the things we have in residential?
Not typically, and again, we've had to, no, I think the roots will choose to go down to go towards the water source.
Derek, will the tree grate with the curb around it, that'll still work with the Silva cells?
It does, yes.
I like this idea here. I think that looks probably nicer, but we also see, I mean, again, looking down on Prairie, like Derek said, when we butt up to the pavers, there's too much there that seems like it can move around. Whereas something like this, that angle iron that fits underneath the grate, I think will be more stable for it.
It does help. The design challenge, if this was a 5x5 and butted up to here, is these brick pavers are 2 1/4 inches, and these grates are only about 1 inch, so I need a concrete base under this with
Set
that
that up.
metal angle iron. It's very easy to frame up on it when I have the curb around there. We've done that lots of times, very common. I could do it where it's just sidewalk, where the pavers come all the way up. It would, we may be able to find a way, it'd be a challenge. So if the board doesn't object, I will say the 4x4 is,
With the silver cells, I mean. the-
yes.
At the same time, our pavers wouldn't look like that, though, if we're doing the 2 feet along the curb.
Agreed.
I
It would
mean,
just
so
be
you-
the 2 foot that would be the
Right, so
challenge.
the pavers would butt up to it really along.
The
one-
street side.
The street side. The rest of it would be a curb cycling in, so it wouldn't quite look like that, but I think it'll be a much more durable.
Right.
We could do the 4x4 using the design of the other grate though, correct? Did the other grate come in the 4x4?
Yes,
next one.
the grates, we
That-
haven't
that-
even gotten into.
That particular grate in the
Right.
4x4 and then I almost said sickle cell, but the silver cell underneath.
We don't want that.
Yeah, the silver cell underneath the grate,
Yeah.
okay, and
There,
then do
there's
4x4.
we haven't even got into grade options. Again, I envision that small group doing that. We can come back to but you should be able to get all these grade options in 4x4 or 5x5.
Can I just ask about process? Have the businesses on 3,700 Grand had any input on actually any of these items?
Are you asking about utilities and?
No, the businesses
These options for lighting.
on 3,700.
We have not had any business meetings and public meetings here.
Is that, will that come in later or are other plans?
I do have some discussion on the spacing and that, and one of our recommendations, there were a couple options discussed at the last board meeting. Currently and Stevie, can you keep flipping through? One more, okay, tree spacing, there we go. So currently, the tree spacing is every other light. There was some input from the board. I thought both directions. I know there was, it was mentioned maybe having a tree between every light. As we met with staff, the preference was still to go every other light, but there was a suggestion made to add more greenery. An option would be on the next slide to add more. We have some potted flower pots out there. We could put those between, so you'd have a tree between one set of lights, then put some decorative flower pots out there. But that's a discussion, and part of our thought process was, since the lighting's the same, and when we built this originally, there was a lot of communication with the businesses, and there was some concern with blocking signs, and that's pretty common in streetscape areas. One of the things we liked is by keeping the light spacing the same, we could keep the tree locations the same, and I don't anticipate a lot of objections. If we want to go to every light, trees between every light, then we just will have to spot those. So that's more board input I'm looking at.
I will say the
Trees.
Beautification Commission has gotten some feedback, not about how beautiful the planters are, which people enjoy them, but about it infringing on their outdoor seating space. And so I think if we went that route, at least for the restaurants that we're allowing outdoor seating to be, is just to think about, well, it's the right of way, so we can make some decisions about how that's used versus how much of the space is available for their seating. But I know they're investing in furniture and that kind of thing. And so there was some surprise by us plopping a couple of planters out there and what that impacted their seating arrangement. So I think I would, with this next piece of the conversation, just to have a conversation with some of those restaurants about it.
Sure.
So we didn't give them enough seating.
The planter was too close to people's elbow.
So one other thought that was brought up during the discussion is with the trees, obviously, if we put the trees between every light, those are permanent. Planters are a little more flexible. You can move those, you can choose to not put them there, but really, the decision really I'm hoping to come away with is just whether we go every other light or do we want trees between every light. Every other light gives you about 120-foot spacing between trees, which is what's out there now. If you go every light, you'll have a denser canopy and you'll have a 60-foot spacing between trees.
And as I brought up, I mean, I understand the desire for more trees, but it's, you know, we also, I mean, in an ideal world, I would have loved to done the curb planters. We have to work with the infrastructure that we have, and we have to remember what we've kind of turned this block of Grand into, and one of the big things we have is the outdoor dining, which was a COVID-related response, and then the concerts on Grand. You've been out, we've all been out there some of those nights where the concerts are going on, and it gets pretty tight, and the outdoor seating, and then when you have bump outs and streetlights and things, we are taking up valuable seating area for it. So, I mean, I love trees as much as anyone, but it's, we gotta remember what the area is and what we've kind of turned it into. So I think we gotta kind of find the balance with the trees.
I think having more trees would be cool, but I also know that having more planters is more watering for Public Works, and that's been a conversation we've had a lot too. So if there's hanging basket planters on the new light poles and then more planters, you know, between, I just want to, you know, that's an additional watering commitment as well.
Feel that we can accommodate watering some additional plants with this.
And I knew you were gonna say that. And I, not that watering isn't a concern, I think it's the space. You have X number of footage for people to walk, to have traffic flow, to have outdoor dining, outdoor tables, people sitting watching the concerts. I mean, we, you know, and we're not going to more than one weekend a month having the music and stuff, but I mean, there are these restaurants thrive on some of this outdoor stuff. I mean, I think if they had the option, people would have been sitting out there tonight, and some people might want to be out there tomorrow night. People like the outdoor stuff, and when you create the flow of them having tables out there, people trying to walk by, pedestrians coming and going, strollers and things, you only have so much square footage to work with there. So I think that's why we got to go with kind of less trees than would be if you were just looking at it as a blank slate.
I don't know. I feel like the tree grates gives you more space to put tables next to it than
Absolutely.
3 giant planters. That's what I've gotten some pushback from, is they don't want that real estate where you can kind of put some tables up pretty close to a tree. So I'm not sure which way to go, but I feel like, and that's why maybe your question about the businesses being asked, they may be able to get up closer to trees than a bunch of additional planters.
Do we currently do the baskets on every other?
Yes.
So maybe that's something we consider doing it on each post, so we can take care of, you know, the flowers and the accents of that by having more of that there. Ultimately, we want the trees to grow. And if the trees grow, you know, there's a history to that, in that they start blocking signage, they start blocking access. And I mean, I think there was a period of time, you know, some 25, 30 years ago, where some of the businesses actually went and cut the trees down themselves because they were in the way. But I mean, we've heard that, especially, I mean, if you look at the tree by Paisan, that's like the tree that's thriving the most. That's getting pretty big out there. You know, so if we're adding more trees, and again, we want the trees to grow, so if they grow, are we creating the problems of, you know, blocking signage, blocking access?
I think that, you know, though, as trees grow, we can limb them up so that they're not blocking signage. If it were up to me, we'd have trees, a 40-foot spacing, but I have a feeling I'm going to have to compromise. I know that if I am sitting out there at Brookfield breakfast at one of those cafe tables, I'd much rather be sitting under a tree than a planter box hanging off of a light pole.
I think you could do more with the planters at the bump outs and have more trees in between if that can accommodate, because you're gonna have less. I mean, they're just more visible at the bump outs too, to see that at a lower level.
But even like, isn't the one bump out right in front of Burger Antics?
Yeah.
Yep.
And I mean, the number of tables they get out there now and staff moving around there and allowing clearance for people to cross, I mean, whether it's a tree or planters, it is taking away some dining space and foot flow traffic. I mean, they have the, you know, during the concerts and the other things, they have a little stand out there, kind of like for their staff to have the basics. There's, I don't want to be the anti-tree guy. It's just that there's got to be room for people to walk by, for people to sit at those tables, for staff to go back and forth.
I think during the concerts, we use the street space and the parking spaces rather than those bump outs. So I don't think that's necessarily the same concern.
But on the nights when they do, I mean, I've walked by there where there's the tables out there, and it is a little hard to walk by sometimes with the space they have, not just on the,
Well, in that case, if we're thinking about designing for these restaurants to have the outdoor space, perhaps we should be designing it so that we take away a parking space and give them more space. Being devil's advocate there.
It is.
taking away a parking space, for what reason?
To give them more outdoor dining space, if that's gonna be a real high priority for us.
I don't know that we want to take away any part, but I guess that's something we could talk about, or not put planters that are going to take up space. I mean,
And to be clear, the planters were offered because, like, to try to find a compromise for more greenery without doubling the amount of trees, because there's some input from some members of the board that they didn't want to add the trees, but I don't think you have to put the planters in. It's really more looking at the more frequent tree spacing, and I think the critical thing would be to look at if I think just making sure we're not blocking the signage. It's so hard to make, you get in detailed design decisions, but the next step is for us to go out there and spot the trees where they be exactly located and see how many of them are.
and I realize that's the next step, and I think the process you've gone through and with the small working group, I think that's a good idea how to do it. I'm just trying to pin down the.
If I could just make a comment, I mean, you go to any downtown in the suburbs, you're gonna have trees. And the trees are going to grow and they're gonna block signage. But this is not a high-speed corridor where, it's not like Ogden Avenue, where if you're driving by, you're not gonna see the sign. This is a pedestrian scale streetscape. So I wouldn't be as concerned, it's easy for me to say, I'm not a business owner, but it's not the same thing as IDOT highway where you're going 40, 50 miles an hour and you have to see the signs. This is a downtown, it's pedestrian scale. I wouldn't be so concerned about trees blocking signs because people who are coming down here typically are walking to their destination and they know, just like any downtown. And you look at suburban downtowns that are generally thriving, I think you do generally have trees.
Yes.
And you may not have the canopy like Brookfield used to have, but in our meeting, I think with Trustee Ketchmark, we looked at LaGrange. And I think they don't have a lot of trees, but they had, I think, more trees than we have now. But I guess my comment is, I wouldn't be so concerned about trees blocking signs. Because no matter where you put a sign, even if we only put trees, as Derek is proposing, at that, you're gonna block, somebody's gonna have a sign block. So if we start trying to plant trees where we're never going to block a sign, it's not gonna happen. I mean, you mentioned Paisans, that's the biggest tree out there, and I think they're doing extremely well with Paisans. So you can't, I don't think we can make, I would recommend you not make decisions on where to put trees because you're worried about blocking signage.
I understand that point, but it's like we have a PIP program where we're offering people money to put new signage and things where, you know, obviously signage is important. And I know everywhere we're going to put a tree, there's going to be some blockage. I'm just, the number of them and the amount of space that they take up is my concern. But it's up for the board to, I'm trying to, you know, if we go, I think this is a decision, as Derek pointed out, we've picked where the lights were before without necessarily going to the business owners. I don't know that we can go to each business owner and say, do you want a tree here, or do you not want a tree here? I think we have to decide, or the staff's got to come forward with a recommendation, but just the general idea of how far apart the trees are, how many trees we're going to put is what you're looking for from us?
It is, yeah, and I think the two options, so when that initial design was, you get your light spacing, but then you play with it and move it up and down to see where, so those trees aren't blocked. I don't think the trees block too many of the signs. Tried to minimize that back then. I think maybe the next step is maybe that staff, small group, maybe 1 or 2 elected officials, we go out and we look at the trees, if we put them in between the lights that don't have a tree now, and how significant, how many signs are we blocking? Or maybe it's not an issue.
I don't want to be, because I'm not so much concerned about the signs, just the overall number of combination of trees and planters taking up space. But maybe to just go backwards, have we all agreed on that we like the idea of the 4x4 with the curb with silver cells, as the general? Is everybody, is that the? Okay, because I want to we kind of moved on from that without me confirming that. So that's the style, the size we like, and then I guess, trying to figure out.
Well, it's not the style, it's 4x4.
With-
We didn't pick the
with the
design of the grate yet, right?
Right.
Correct, and I envision that being kind of a staff and the small group. There's infinite number of tree grates, so that's something we'll look at.
But what do you need more, what do you need now after that? How many trees, how far apart the
The
trees?
spacing, yeah.
Spacing.
So
In
you're-
other words, 60 foot or 120.
So it's either gonna be light tree, light tree, light tree, or light tree, light tree kind of thing.
Yeah.
I vote 60, and I'm gonna wear my trees, I love trees shirt for the next meeting.
I think I lean to the light tree, the alternating. So this would be the 60-foot.
60 foot spacing.
Tree canopy is a really valuable way to create a space that feels like a pedestrian space. I'll point that out. Go 60.
The environmental benefits.
Oh, we don't even, we could go off on
So
that
is
too.
everyone
yes.
on the 60-60? 60? That seems to be the consensus? Okay. All right, so then, and I appreciate the group that's working on this, because we do need to move this along for the submittals and things like this, but we've made a lot of progress, so.
Yes, thank you. Couple more and we'll,
You're not done yet.
No, I know, I know,
But wait, there's more.
but there's more.
so one of the things that came up in our discussion with the small group is, we all know as we come northbound on Prairie over the tracks, you either go straight on Prairie or you take the left on Grand. And we've got that nose of the island that sits out there, and people sometimes sit out there, eat. There's a lot of pedestrians. Is there a way to protect them, a little more safety? It was also brought up as the opportunity for a little branding for either the village or maybe just the business district. So I have to give credit to Trustee Hendricks. She helped out with a couple of nice exhibits. Staff really liked the seat wall that were proposed. Can we blow up on that a little, Stevie? Thank you. So she prepared a nice rendering for us, basically showing a relatively short seat wall, 18-inch, 24-inch type seat wall. We showed a Brookfield on there. It could be something else, could be Grand Boulevard Business District, whatever the village chooses. We could get into styles later, but one option, it provides a little protection for any of the pedestrians or patrons out there, and it gives it kind of a unique look, for Brookfield. The other option we looked at is putting some bollards in. If we could blow up on the picture, right? Part of the reason staff wasn't as in favor of bollards is, the cars are about 6 foot wide. We need to space these bollards if we're providing protection less than 6 feet apart. They need to be fairly heavy-duty bollards if they're going to provide protection, so they're not that simple, just lighted bollard that maybe some of us are used to. So we didn't really like the look of this as much as we like the seat wall. So looking for
Would those bollards, you said lighter, but would they be lighted in any way, or there's bollards with lights in them too?
they
right?
do have bollards with lights in them. Now, most of them are a little more decorative than what we'd be
we need the
installing
strength.
these
Yeah.
are a little heavy duty, but I imagine we could find some heavy duty bollards with lights. But
And are we talking just that particular corner?
I think so. It's kind of the group where we looking at us, if we're doing the seat wall, I think that's the main one. I don't know that we have the history of accidents either, but the one corner is just such an obvious
Coming over,
decision
yeah.
as you cross the tracks.
Could that also be a planter?
It could.
Or, yeah.
We don't have room for, no, sorry, sarcasm.
I'm just wondering if you could plant in the seat
Could
wall.
be a
Just curious.
planter.
Certainly could be.
That nose between those two crosswalks, there is enough room for that to be a planter and seat wall without infringing on any seating that's already being used out there.
Yeah.
So the seating, you'd sit facing like the Brookfield breakfast, like it would be the.
Yeah.
And, you know, Tim brought that, I think it's a great, I'm a little worried because I like the idea of the safety and the protection it provides, but I guess if you're worried about someone coming over the tracks and hitting them, there's people sitting there, I guess they would hit the Brookfield sign first before it would hit them, but,
Not if they're sitting on the wall.
Dancing.
and it
We've
could be.
learned that if you have a concrete wall about this high, it tends to stop a car.
We have learned that.
Past
Thanks for
experience.
trying all that out.
It tends to attract cars, I think.
Yeah.
Don't put a magnet in this
So
one.
that could be one benefit of doing it as a planter because the people would be sitting that much further from that leading edge where a car might potentially hit or bounce.
And you've got a couple of you got wall on both sides.
But would it affect any sight lines then? Like,
That's why it's so low.
yeah.
Yeah,
But I
that's
mean, if
why.
you did planters, I mean, if the plantings came up,
I'm sorry, I'm.
Yeah, no, jump
speaking
in.
up
It's
a
gotta
lot.
be shorter planting,
Yes,
so it doesn't
the idea would
obstruct.
for it to be shorter plantings, so it's not more than like 3 feet, so that when you're driving past, it doesn't affect those sight lines. I know that's really important to be able to see what the other cars are doing in that intersection, so it would have to be lower.
Absolutely.
and it'd be a cool turn for Cycle Brookfield's Intelligentsia Cup. You'd be going right around that.
Very visible from the train.
The riders would all see that as they,
If someone crashes into that, we all just run, right?
I like that
Would be on the
idea.
other side,
Told
too?
you bollards would be better.
Yeah.
We've got one concern with this seawall.
Just a small concern, only in my observation of the stage that gets pulled in for the Concerts on Korean series. He does use that bump out to position the trailer stage so that it can sit between the bump out there. Again, would have to confirm, but as I've seen him pull in and position the stage, and as I'm looking at the seat wall, there could be some issue there with not being able to configure a stage in that area with that size of a seat wall.
Would he be able to use the bump out on the other side of Grand?
I think it used, you're not talking about just the drop off, you're talking the actual placement of the,
The placement of it, when he pulls in and he'll pop up onto that bump out to kind of.
so the stage might be part of the stage might be part of the footprint of the wall is drawn right now, is what you're saying, or is it just?
Not the footprint of the stage,
Staging.
just the pull in and positioning of it.
Okay.
So the point is, could he pull up on the Sebastian's curb, bump out?
Maybe if we go to the aerial, we can look at Sebastian's there.
The stage backwards at that point.
Wouldn't you have the seating wall on both sides?
Yeah, that's what no
You
no
could.
seat wall.
You
on
could,
Sebastian's
yeah.
side.
You could, but it's less of a, I thought it was less of a danger coming around that corner on the other side of the street. Plus, if you're looking from Prairie, that's really the focal point from either the train or from Prairie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This corner is.
Well, using the bump out though for Sebastian's for staging, Sebastian's uses that. Do they use that whole bump out for seating during music on Grand?
But if I'm understanding, Steve, it's not so much this, where the stage goes, it's getting it there and getting it dropped off there. It's not so much that that's why I asked if the drawing of this wall would affect the footprint of the stage. I'm getting the answer is no, it's just getting it in there the way it's brought in and dropped off.
So the thought would be, when we have staff contact whoever brings these in and see if we put this, can show them what we're proposing and see if they think they could work around it.
Yeah. And maybe it could be shorter, like it doesn't go as far down Grand Boulevard end, because I mean, I like the design. So yeah, I think Derek, that's a good idea, because, well, I mean, does everyone like the wall idea, the planter wall? Planter,
do.
seat wall / planter? Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so consensus is let's move forward with the planter,
Yeah.
and we'll make sure it works with the stage. If not, we'll have to come back with some ideas.
Sure. Okay.
Only two more, thank you. Just wanted to mention some additional amenities, because they were brought up in the group. I think the trustees may all be thinking of these. Again, more detailed than necessarily at the board as far as exact placement, but we are looking at electrical outlets on all of the light poles. We can string lights, we can do all that. We'll meet with staff now that we have the light pole locations agreed to. We do anticipate banner and planter supports on the light poles. We'll come back with exact, whether it's every light, every other light, we'll come back with some recommendations there. It was brought up, can we put in some conduits for electrical vehicle charging stations? Yes, it was suggested maybe down at the north end. I'd like to go ahead and discuss that more. Katie, yeah.
Big
I
thumbs
see you
up,
nodding
Derek.
at me. There was some discussion with Cindy about maybe pursuing a grant too. So our thought would be maybe if we could just locate them on the plan and we could get conduit so we don't have to dig anything up when you go ahead and put those in. But those, I don't know that those are eligible, and I'm not sure we'll have enough design information and time to include them in this grant. But at least we'll get the conduit stubbed out to the right location, is our thought.
Can
EV ready.
How
Sounds
long,
great.
I mean, how long does it take to charge an EV? Like, how long is someone typically parking in an EV parking space for charging?
It depends on what kind of charger it is,
Okay,
because there's fast chargers that could be an hour or two.
okay. Because, I mean, I'm, again, all in favor of these charges. I just don't know that, like, you want to monopolize spaces for this. I would think it'd be more beneficial along the commuter tracks or something like this, where, I mean, if someone going to come and park their car to charge it for several hours in a,
Possibly it could be helpful for the apartment folks, like in the future if we had some more charging stations for folks. But also this is just the conduit, so you're not committing to putting charging stations here, but it's a lot cheaper to run the line at this point than go
So
back and
you're
pick it up
talking more
later.
at the north end of it towards Grand and Grant?
Yep.
So it was suggested, and just a thought, I think we've talked about this in a few locations. I think what staff could do is, again, maybe a small group of elected officials, maybe Katie's involved, and we should have a plan for the whole downtown of where you'd like these.
Sure.
Like you're mentioning, if you're gonna put them along the commuter parking, maybe we don't need them on Grand, or maybe we want some each. So maybe it's something we could work over the next few months on and get that established.
Sure.
It's not holding up this project, though.
Okay.
Another great idea was, it was brought up in the group, electrical connections for the summer events at the south end of the block. So we have generators and that. We can look, if we need 240 higher electrical, we can do something like that. So that's being examined as part of the final design. Benches, garbage cans can be, they wouldn't be part of the project, they need to be permanent. We would match the style that we have out currently, but those have been discussed and can be installed too to complete the streetscape look. I would like to mention, so when we originally did Grand back in the 90s, I think we all know it extends up Prairie up to the first alley there by the post office. There's 2 or 3 lights on each side. In 25, when we do this, I would recommend we extend the streetscape
Prairie,
up there, and we can use TIF funding. It won't be eligible because that's off the limits of this project. And I mentioned earlier about lights at Burlington and Prairie on the south side, and it seemed like we had consensus to do that this year probably because of the Burlington improvements. We'd probably try to do that this year.
Can you just go back, I think I brought this up once before, and it's just, I can't think of where but how do these towns, like, you have Christmas music playing, like, in the district, is there speakers on the poles, or is it something you add to the poles? I mean, I'm trying to, I know I've seen it somewhere where you have the ability to have just music playing on the block, not when you don't have concerts in the park or anything like that, just, you have holiday music on the 3700 block of Grand. Is there some way to I know it's done somewhere, so is that a possible?
I've seen it. It's definitely possible. I'm not really, I haven't designed it, so I'd have to look into that a
Just-
little. So if there's a desire, that can be one of the
Well, I'm throwing
amenities.
it out there. I don't,
Yeah.
it's I mean, if, I don't know how the board feels about it, or.
Seen it in rocks, fake rocks.
Anyone else interested in that, or
I
should we
think it
just?
would be my preference.
I don't mind it. It's worth to listen to. I mean,
Okay,
it's worth to investigate to see what the option is and the price is.
Okay, we'll look into that and bring some
Okay.
options back then.
all right.
Last slide. So just a reminder, next steps. We would bring back, we're probably at a point we could bring back an addendum to get all this design done. We'll continue to work out all the details of the amenities. Ultimately, we are submitting our initial plans to IDOT to maintain this September letting. Our initial plans go in April. Typically, it's about 2 months for their review, so we can continue to refine the design between April and June. But just so we all have it on our radar, June is final plan submittal. So we'd like to work out 95% plus of these items by, I think it's April 12th for that submittal. If there's a little fine tuning and the 2 months IDOT reviews it, that's okay. But construction is proposed in 2025. I want to mention this is based on contingency funding. We've had great luck with it. We got it for Shields, Washington. You know, we stepped out and said this isn't usually eligible from the West Cook Transportation Council, but because it wasn't coming out of their budget, annual budget, they said, yes, you can add these streetscape. Well, it's not a guarantee. Every conversation we've had with the liaison, Mike Fricano, he said that he thinks there's no reason why we wouldn't get this money. If for some reason something fell through, we'd have shelf-ready plans, but I'm confident we're getting the money, but I can't guarantee it. Just want the board to be aware of that.
Just in terms of timing and bringing stuff back, I mean, I think the March 25th meeting, we might be down 2 board members. So, I mean, we have March 11th coming up, but March 25th, we might be down 2 board members. But we'll still have agendas and meetings, but at least 2 board members will be out on the 25th, so.
Okay.
So if you need time on the March 11th agenda for more feedback, that would be good. So, I mean, not that we can't do it on the 25th, but just for planning purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on this?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. There's been a lot of staff time, board time, elected official time on this. And I know you guys have been out walking, so thank you. It's exciting to think about what we can get done. All right, I think that ends the items that we have on the agenda. I open up one more time to public comment. Is there any public comment on this side? Any public comment on this side? Okay, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole at 9:11.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was made by trustee Cote, second by trustee Kaluzny. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Cote?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks?
Aye.
Trustee Nearmatsu?
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Thanks, Mark.